Hello, can we please take our seats? We seem to be running out of time so that we can close on time and go for lunch, come back and have some good discussions. So the next session will be moderated by Clara Zimmerman from the US EPA, and there will be a spotlight on methane mitigation work taking place in the biogas sector, specifically in India. So we hand over to Clara. Clara, over to you, please.
Thank you, Fifi, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for being here. I'm really excited to dive into a discussion about India and biogas. I think these regional panels have produced some really great opportunity for knowledge exchange, and we've had a nice introduction to the picture in India, at least in the wastewater space, just from Dr. Badahar. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Clara Zimmerman, and I work at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I've been with the Methane Partnerships branch for about 2 years, and I'm a program manager working on the waste sector, solid waste methane emissions domestically in the US and also internationally through the Global Methane Initiative. I'm also part of the Secretariat team who spearheaded this whole conference, so it's awesome to be here, and I also would love to hear your feedback on the whole event. But I wanted to start this session with a few brief opening remarks and kind of a preview of what we're going to cover. So, according to a 2021 publication by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, India has an urban population of almost 380 million, generating 55 million tons of solid waste. And this is expected to increase to 170 million tons of waste by 2030 and about 440 million tons by 2050. India is on the forefront of developing biogas from solid waste and agriculture and is currently making major strides in this area. So that's why we wanted to cover it today. I'll start by just saying India has actually strong solid waste regulations on the books. So India developed and published the Solid Waste Management Rules of 2016 that lay out a clear and comprehensive process for managing waste. It includes management of wet or organic waste, which is the primary contributor to methane emissions. And one of the key processes is anaerobic digestion, and a number of biogas facilities are being developed across India in various sizes to treat MSW. India also has a number of initiatives to promote biogas as it seeks to develop renewable energy and reduce its dependence on imported fossil fuels. So, one of these key initiatives is the Sustainable Alternatives Towards Affordable Transportation, or SATAT, which promotes development of compressed biogas as a transportation fuel. And a number of cities in India, again, are developing facilities to process lots of organic waste, with Indore having one of the largest plants to date, handling up to 550 tons per day. So in addition, bulk waste generators like fruit and vegetable markets and hotels, et cetera, are operating biogas plants using their own organic waste to generate electricity to power the markets and facilities. And that's all for my brief introduction. I'm here today to give you a lot more detail into some of these topics. I have a fabulous panel of folks working on methane and biogas in India. So we have Chief Executive of the World Biogas Association, Charlotte Morton, Aditi Ramola, Technical Director at the International Solid Waste Association, and you've heard already a bit from Ton Frankowitz, the waste sector methane subject matter expert at RMI. And I'll invite each of them now to give short presentations, and I will ask them a couple questions afterwards. Hopefully we'll have time. So go ahead, Charlotte.
Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here with you all, and thanks to the Global Methane Initiative for inviting me to be here today. So let's move on to the presentation, and just very briefly covering the bigger picture around waste management, which we've already talked about. But just to be clear, we've been waste management systems really haven't changed for a very long time. And so we are still pretty much either landfilling it, burying it, or burning it. Every year, we humans are generating around 105 billion tons of organic wastes, whether that's through food waste, sewage, animal manures and slurries, etc., which is creating a huge methane problem. if they're not recycled, they're emitting methane and other greenhouse gas emissions. About 98% of those organic wastes are not being recycled. We talk about anaerobic digestion as the core technology for doing that, because they have that process, and hopefully you're all anaerobically digesting your delicious croissants. Anaerobic digestion turns a problem into valuable products: biogas, biomethane, bio-COG, bio-CO2, natural fertilizers, and other useful biomaterials. If we can recycle all that organic waste, we have the possibility of delivering around half of the global methane pledge, pretty exciting, and cutting global greenhouse gas emissions by about 11%, another exciting number. And that's why, in fact, the industry is growing pretty fast. If you're an investor and you saw this slide, which shows the combined annual growth rate by a number of forecasters for the industry at around 8.5%, you go, "Well, that's exciting. I want to be in that industry." But that growth rate put against the growth rate we need to achieve if we're to deliver the global methane pledge looks pretty flat and dull along the bottom line, that green line, and that rusty red line going almost vertically upwards is the growth rate we need to achieve. So this is the challenge. How are we going to build hundreds of thousands of biogas plants and related infrastructure in less than 6 years' time? The average time it takes to get across Europe is 2 to 7. That's just for one plant. So we have come up with what we refer to as a Biogas Happen program, which is a suite of programs designed to deliver potential as fast as possible. And with huge thanks to the Global Methane Hub, with additional support from Total Energies and GHD, work has kicked off on 2 of those elements in the beginning of this year. So these 2 elements, phase 1 of those, are a global regulatory biogas framework, or maybe the other way around, global biogas regulatory framework, which it will entail the development effectively of a suite of all the policies and regulations that need to be in place to support, implement, standardize, and monitor a high-performing biogas industry at a national level. We'll be taking best practice examples from around the world. So there's a lot already being done. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. And one of the elements here is that we've tasked GHD with, no one's in the room, but they are really under a lot of pressure here, to develop a revolutionary way of getting a permit in weeks rather than years. It can be done. We put a man on the moon. We can do this. Phase 2 will be focusing on taking that global standard and adapting it and rolling it out on a country by country basis, and will be developed in the context of a country specific biogas roadmap, and I'll come on to that in a minute. The second element is developing an international standardized AD certification scheme, similarly, as I say, funded by the Global Methane Hub, Total Energies and GHD. And this will be an independently audited biogas-specific scheme, which is designed to improve the health, safety, environmental and operational performance of biogas plants. Specifically, also, it will have attached to it a life cycle assessment, a standardized life cycle assessment that is robust and will have the confidence of people such as the World Resources Institute who manage the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, so that we can properly evidence and incentivize maximum decarbonisation of each biogas plant and link that to carbon markets. That should also allow us ultimately to get off subsidy as fast as possible, which is also a holy grail. So phase 1 is developing a standardized international certification scheme, and we will be taking the UK example of an existing AD certification scheme and updating that, adding on the LCA, etc. to it. Phase 2 will be likewise implementing at a national or local level, and that will involve aligning it with the scheme with country-specific standards and existing legislation. So Turning now specifically to India, India's super exciting from a biogas potential point of view. And of course, we want it to be exciting because that's, if we can get investors excited about it, then they will help hoover up all those organic wastes that are causing a problem. So there's sufficient collectible organic material in India that could deliver around more than 9% of India's energy needs. So giving it energy security and energy independence. It would also incentivize the installation of safely managed household sanitation facilities. 54% of India's population doesn't have access today. Huge benefit. Create around 1 million new jobs. And in addition, create green tech supply chains for India's industry. It would help tackle the ongoing problem of burning rice straw, which when I was in India recently is definitely bit of an issue, improving air quality for millions. And quite a lot of this organic material is finding its way into rivers and oceans where it's causing a pretty significant problem. And some would argue, the Goes Institute in Scotland would argue that's a bigger problem, in fact, than climate change. So ultimately, addressing this would help mitigate climate change, enhance food security, and in addition, improve the health for millions who bathe and wash clothes in rivers. But it's pretty hard actually to ensure that you've got all of the policies in place to put this opportunity into practice. One thing I'd like to highlight, though, as a particular opportunity, is that if we are able to replace LNG imports through the production of bio CNG, that would generate the rather stonking amount of of $29 billion that instead of being spent on importing LNG could be used to help develop the infrastructure in urban areas that we need and supporting farmers to build biogas facilities, etc. So I touched on phase 2. One of the challenges I think all of us will recognise in relation to biogas and the circular economy of organic waste, as we talk about, is that it involves an enormous number of stakeholders who all need to have their interests aligned in delivering and doing their bit in making this happen. So we've been discussing with the Indian government to develop a national biogas roadmap that would do just that. It would bring together all stakeholders to develop, to understand fully what the potential is, understand what the barriers are, and agree what changes need to be made to ensure to harness those huge opportunities that are there for India, and develop effectively the 2 programs I talked about, the Global Biogas Regulatory Framework and the International AD Certification Scheme, and adapt those to the Indian context. The key is clearly going to be developing partnerships, the harmonisation of policies, regulations and standards, and close collaboration with policymakers, industry, funders, civil society, associations and international partners who are working in the biogas space to deliver that roadmap that has the necessary buy-in from all government departments and other stakeholders. Why is it exciting too? Well, India, as host of the G20, founded the Global Biofuels Alliance, which it is hoping will help facilitate and support the growth of biofuels globally through the G20, creating the blueprint for a biogas roadmap for India could be a lasting legacy that it could pass on to host Brazil and other countries as part of the G20 or as a legacy for setting up the Global Biofuels Alliance. And the key will be fostering public-private partnerships and taking a consortium approach to enable industry ultimately to lead the biogas agenda at every stage. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. That was a really great overview and really exciting stuff that you're working on. I love the 2 graphs of how many biogas digesters we need to build. Huge questions there. All right, I'll turn it over to Aditi.
Thanks, Clara. And hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here today. And I would like to thank the organizers for setting up such an enriching program. And thank you, Charlotte, for giving a big overview of where the biogas potential lies for the world, and also for briefly mentioning what India is doing. As you know, the government of India is promoting biogas at a national level through many schemes that Clara mentioned at the beginning as well. We have the Satat scheme, which is the sustainable alternative towards affordable transportation. So, taking biogas and making it into biofuel. And then we also have something called the Gobardhan scheme. But my presentation is not about the national level policies today, but actually doing a deep dive for 10 minutes. I mean, I think it deserves a much longer story, but talking about a city called Indore and how it's transformed itself in the last 10 years to be the cleanest city in India. And why that would be relevant for today's session is because we heard about clean feedstocks at the beginning. So, if you want to have a success story of any kind of biogas plants supplying us any form of energy, we need to make sure that we have clean feedstocks. And just 10 years ago, the city I'm going to talk about had waste on their streets, a lot of open burning and dumping. And in the last 7 years, they've become the cleanest city in India. And so we want to see how this model can be replicated. But before going in deep into the city context, I would like to just go back and set the national context, because biogas as a technology, we've called it 50 years ago gobar gas technology. So we've been using feedstock from manure and so on to generate energy in India. But at the national level, the waste problem, the problem of municipal solid waste, wasn't addressed till before a crisis happened. How many of you were paying attention back then? But we had a tiny crisis in the form of a bubonic plague that actually there was an outbreak in the city of Surat, and that led municipal authorities to think about the issues of open dumping and open burning, and attracting rodents and so on. And several NGO groups and activists and people working in the field from the environmental angle, they actually filed public interest litigations to the government of India and actually started developing national rules. So, starting in 94, culminating in 2000, we got our first set of waste management rules. Those are essentially the municipal solid waste management and handling rules of 2000. And here they talked about who's responsible for what the generators need to be doing, collection, transportation, and so on and so forth. But there were still a lot of things missing. And as we developed through the GDP ladder, we are also seeing complexity in our waste streams and so on. So the government thought of revamping these rules with the help of actually GIZ and the government of Germany. And in 2016, we came up with the solid waste management rules of 2016. And so the word municipal was eliminated, and that's for a reason, because it wasn't only municipal authorities that we were looking at. We were looking at the rural areas, we were looking at different kinds of waste generators, and so on. And here, the rules are very clear about what the role of each generator is. Everybody, in fact, all 1.4 billion of us are waste generators, and we have a responsibility to follow these national level rules. And you'll quickly see why I'm talking about this, because in the last sentence, I'm emphasizing the three separate streams that we are supposed to collect or separate our waste into. So each of us, Dr. Nupur, myself, and whoever else lives in India, into biodegradable, so the wet waste, the dry waste, and household hazardous fraction. And so then this brings us to in 2014, our government set up something called the Clean India Mission, or you might know it as the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, the Clean India Mission, SBM2. And they essentially, I think, still back. And they said that we need to follow these. Well, the 2000, it was the 2000 rules at that time, and that we need to follow this. And that's when the revamping of the 2016 rules happened. And it was that every generator has to abide by these rules. And to do that, they set up something like the Swachh Sarvekshan, very hard word to say in Hindi, but it's cleanliness survey. It's the biggest of its kind. And it's also it's playing. I think it's a dual strategy in some ways, because it's also bringing awareness at this mass level, because it's the Prime Minister's or the government of India's initiative, flagship program. And instrumental in fostering this kind of very friendly competitiveness among cities, urban local bodies, like we like to call them. And it started with a couple of hundred cities, I think, back in 2016. At that time, Indore, the city of Indore, was 25th in number, and now 2023 survey had over 4,200 or 400 urban local bodies that participated, 88 Ganga towns. Ganga is one of the biggest rivers in India, and 61 cantonments, which are basically army residences. So the parameters that are used in this survey refer to a lot of factors, but a few of them, whether there's door-to-door waste collection or not, is there source segregation happening, what is the cleanliness of the areas, and so on and so forth. And also citizen feedback is taken very seriously. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because in that survey ranking, Indore has featured top of the list for the last 7 years. Which when we started in 2016, they were number 25. And so what was that push that led them to get this position? And I think it was a culmination of a lot of things coming together: political will, administrative will. We heard about the political will and administrative will in the session 2 days ago, and both were important to have. Um, just to give you a background, the city of Indore is located bang in the middle of India. It's in the central state of Madhya Pradesh. It's the most populous city in the state currently. Um, India hasn't had its census since 2011, so we're just extrapolating numbers. And here I'll also mention the challenge we have with data, not just in India, but globally. If you saw the report that we released 3 weeks ago, data is a massive challenge. But we estimate the population of Indore to be approximately 3 million people. They're generating 100 tons per day of waste. Almost 60% of that is wet. Approximately 39 is dry, and a little bit of household hazardous waste is being generated. The Indore, so the responsibility for waste management in Indore is by the Indore Municipal Corporation. In India, we have several levels of who manage waste. These urban local bodies could be corporations, could be municipalities, could be and when you look at the rural side of things, it could be the panchayats and so on and so forth. Indore is a corporation because it's a bigger city, and it has been divided into 19 zones and 85 wards. So back in 2016, when they ranked 25, essentially the mayor that was elected at that time, she found it extremely despicable and also challenging, and wanted to do something about. So she was the of the city, and thankfully she had a executive officer on her side too, Mr. Manish Singh, IAS. He at that time was the administrator, and they together had that political and the administrative will to do something about it. So they got together and they said, okay, how are we going to change things in Indore, which was, as I said, a city 10 years ago, a lot of open dumping. I don't have pictures from back then. These are pictures we took 4 months ago, Claire and I. And at that time, they said, we need to change the face of the city. Let's do something about it. And they came together. It was a concerted effort. They started with wards out of those 85 wards, the ones that they started sensitizing the public. They brought in vehicles to start separately collecting the waste categories, three categories. They listened to the public. They actually sent out their officials to listen to the public to see where the issues were. And funny enough, when somebody comes and knocks on your door to talk about waste, you complain not only about wastewater, you complain about the light not working on the street. Eventually, they agony aunt in some ways. And so they listened to those complaints. They went back, and there was a time to actually act on those complaints as well. So that's where they started building the trust. And I think my former colleague from CCAC, Sandra, we were speaking well, that trust is, if you want rated feedstocks for your biogas plants, your biomethanization plants, you need clean feedstocks. And who are the waste? Us. If you don't get source, you're at best going to biostabilize your waste and send it as biocover to a landfill. Hopefully, in India, we're still selling that as compost, unfortunately. So that's why you needed the trust. And they called them, I've written this down. They sent out the vehicles with people that they called community mobilizers. And those mobilizers were talking to each household how to separate their waste. They did exercises even in terms of what volumes of bins they should have at their households, because maybe the wet waste won't be collected every day. So you need to have a bin big enough to collect that for a couple of days, and so on and so forth. There was songs that were played so that people were aware of these vehicles coming by, little jingles and so on. And Gila Sukha, some a song was wet, dry, waste. You need to collect it in two separate ways. Lots of jingles were made. And
It's very catchy.
it is very catchy. She's been, I've been, yeah. And so all these activities were carried out. I mean, you might think that such a basic approach, but if you want that sustainability of a system, you need to start from scratch. Waste management is a long story. I think we heard that in the last sessions as well. It's not that's why I've written an overnight year-long success. And so it took them from that whole. I have 1 minute. Oh my gosh. Yes. So it took that long. They also pursued waste fees. We've seen that gate fees is very hard to collect in countries like ours, but they had fines, they had spot fines, and that was really implemented. Again, that administrative will was so crucial because that one administrative officer who used to do rounds at 4 a.m. This is a legendary story, which is actually true. He would call his jagidar, darogas, which are like sanitary inspectors, at 4 a.m. and say, "Can we have a coffee? Where are you guys at right now?" So it became kind of like a game for him. Um, but anyhow, this story deserves a much longer session. I'm going to do a webinar with the officials of Indore. But since it's a biogas session too, just to say that they, after several years of being on top, a couple of years of being on top, they decided also to do valorizing their organic waste. First plant that was set up, a biomethanization plant, right opposite to a big farmer's or a vegetable and fruit market. It's a 20-ton per day municipal solid waste plant. They get organic waste from that market. It was down for maintenance when we went. I have to say that too, because the challenges which I want to talk about too, that you have the capex, but what about the opex? Are you still getting the good feedstock? Are you maintaining your facility? So that's a big challenge too. So as we ramp up, biogas production in India through our Satat and so on, we need to make sure that those are going to be sustainable in the end, and the facility and infrastructure. 2 years ago, the Prime Minister 150-ton per day plant in Indore, which is, I think, the biggest in India. But it was again down for maintenance when we went in October. They did not allow us to go in. This is not to shame anybody, it's just to say that these are challenges that we face. And I think the an issue. Essentially, these biogas plants. I mean, the technology is fairly simple. It's a complex matter because it needs the bioenzymes and stomach essentially don't have the right enzymes, things can go way off. So it's the goal of these plants is to produce transportation fuel, and they are actually powering a few buses in the city of Indore. So that's just about the plants and the things to consider for the future, of course, to make sure that the feedstock is correct. So the challenge that Indore is going to face for the last 7 years, they've been the cleanest city in India. Last year, they tied first place with Surat, another city in Gujarat. But what they've told us, actually, the mayor, when we spoke to him, right, the source separated collection is not an easy task at all. As soon as these community mobilizers stop going to households, the behavior reverts. And so how are we going to maintain everything? The cost of sound disposal and management, because to maintain those facilities, you need to have maintenance all the time, the membranes and all the things that we heard about also in the session. And then finally, they think about the job of collection transportation. I haven't gone at all in doing with the disposal systems. They do have a tree landfill, which we didn't visit actually time there, but we still need to look at that side of things, the bottom of the hierarchy or the pyramid. But I want to end because time is up. That's from 3-4 months ago, the transfer stations in Indore. Thank you so much. We can answer questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aditi. I know that was hard to cover in a short time, but I will also say we're going to put out from GMI. We're planning on having like a document about the success story and those steps that they took to get there. We don't have time for questions. Just okay. Oh. Oh,
Dr. Sunil Pandey.
So our division, Environment and Waste Management Division from TERI is actually working on field.
Exactly.
So we are from the same division.
So for those on, Dr. Badaher said that she worked at TERI.
Solid.
Awesome. That's great. Okay, we can now turn over to Tom.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I at least expect to have a relatively short presentation, so maybe we'll have some time for discussion at the end. So, like Clara's already given the introduction, I'm my industries program lead our efforts on mitigating methane emissions from the waste sector. A little bit about us. We're a think tank. There's a lot of think tanks out there, and we focus on energy and climate. But our approach is essentially, working to transform to decarbonize the economy. But because 70% of emissions come from the energy sector, and so we're working to reduce emissions 50% by 2030, so that we could stay on the path for 1.5 degrees. And just a reminder, that path is to avoid 1.5 degrees, not getting there, even though we're well on our way. But because it has 80 times the global warming potential of CO2, and we really think it's important to work on these concurrently to not only achieve our goal, but to have the greatest impact in the near future. Okay, so a little bit about a waste clinic. What exactly is it? So I'm going to be talking about the waste clinic that we ran, but I want to provide a little bit of background on it. It's kind of an odd name, but it's a great way to work closely with municipalities or any group really to kind of have a peer-to-peer exchange of information. This is something that I'm trying to give proper credit, although its original origin I think is somewhat unknown. But over about 10 years ago, this is something that US EPA, C40, Environment Climate Change Canada, a concept they worked to develop and host at an early Climate and Clean Air Coalition meeting with the Waste Initiative. It's evolved over the years. There's been numerous organizations involved in using it and adapting the concept. And so RMI, as well as our partners at Clean Air Task Force, are working to document that process. I know they have a how-to guide coming out for the work they've done in Latin America, and we'll be publishing the results of this project that we did with our partners at TERI, with generous support from Environment Climate Change Canada, to share the results of that project so that others can take it and continue to evolve it. So these are the basic steps of organizing a waste clinic. I won't read through them, but you could read them yourself here. I'll just highlight that there's a couple key considerations here. What makes a waste clinic unique is not so much what you do the day of, although there's some kind of special aspects of that. But what makes it different than a typical workshop is all the research that goes into advance of it, because you're really trying to maximize impact and have the right combination of people there. There's a lot of research that goes into advance of identifying the right folks, knowing the conditions of the cities, what their issues are, and then bringing in the right experts to lay the foundation. So the day of, and those are kind of the steps over here, the day of, you have all the research done and the right folks. You provide that foundation at the beginning with expert speakers, and then those speakers are engaged through the process, through your discussions and identifying problems or challenges, discussing solutions, and then mapping those to a work plan at the end. And so really everything runs quite smoothly the day of, because you have all the right ingredients together. For this project, we focused in Uttar Pradesh, and as Dr. Nupar mentioned, they are not the largest geographically, but certainly the largest population-wise. And as you know, also waste generation is very much a function of population size. Of course, that's not always the case, but generally speaking, the more people, the more waste. So in this case, because Uttar Pradesh not only has the largest population, there's also numerous cities above 1 million in population each. So we focused on larger cities in the region, and then we hosted the clinic in Lucknow. It's the capital of UP, but it's also a city that we had some experience working in, and so they graciously agreed to host it. Also, because Terry had good working relationships with a lot of those municipalities, and I think Aditi mentioned the urban local bodies. These are essentially like the municipal departments that are responsible for waste. Because of those existing working relationships, we were able to quickly identify basically the right people who were at the right level, both politically to make change, but also had the technical background to have a really productive mix of participants. All right, so these are just some pictures of the workshop. I think you'll see Dr. Sunil Pandey again. He's getting quite famous throughout these presentations. But this is just an example of what that process will look like. So generally speaking, in your research ahead of time, you'll identify some of the critical issues, the priority issues. You'll want to keep that list relatively short, no more than 4 to 5, because you'll organize those discussions in a round robin, one topic per table. At some point, you get too many tables, it gets a little unwieldy. And in this case, the speakers who kind of provide that context for the day, they'll also then participate throughout the day, helping guide but not direct those discussions. It's really meant for the municipalities in kind of peer-to-peer discussions to talk through their issues. They'll inevitably find a lot of commonality. And then sometimes when there's a question, or maybe when the discussion gets stuck, the expert will intervene and guide the discussion along. But their job is really to facilitate. You see the notepads here. We will take notes throughout the process, and as kind of common themes emerge, we'll write them down so that we can summarize things at the end. But then also the participants are developing their work plans throughout that process. The first half of the day, in this case, 4 topic areas, the challenges are identified. The second half of the day, we start talking about solutions and then mapping those solutions to challenges. And by the end of the day, you have a nice starting place for your work plan. This is a summary, and these issues are going to come up quite often when it comes to waste management, and more specifically organic waste management, which is really the focus of this workshop because of its connection to methane. So these are some of the challenges we documented, but I think these also speak well to challenges that you're going to inevitably encounter in waste management and organics waste management. So data collection, waste generation and characterization, source segregation and collection. That's a major issue, and especially in the Indian context because of the 2016 regulations that require segregation and treatment by bulk waste generators. Actually effectively segregating and collecting that waste is a major treatment. Of course, once you're generating this feedstock, treatment is another major challenge. Scaling up capacity, not only physical capacity, but trained operators to effectively treat. And then disposal. Inevitably, you will still need, whether it's landfills or incineration or other treatment methods, you will still need a final disposal backbone. And so these are universal issues, but especially in the Indian context, with the focus on organic waste management, these are particularly salient. This is just a sample work plan. So we actually, by the end of the workshop, each city had kind of a draft work plan that they were able to then take back to their management in this case, because we had separate funding for this workshop, Terry actually engaged with several cities to help them further refine their work plans. So in this project, we worked with Agra and Ghaziabad. Agra, on one hand, Agra is probably not a well-known city, but it also is the home of the Taj Mahal. So it's actually quite famous city, but also given the population, generates quite large amount of waste because of the large tourist population. So we focused in those two cities, helped them further refine their work plans with the commitment that they would then be taking it and incorporating it into their municipal work plans and update those KPIs to reflect this. And so this is just a snapshot. Data collection was a universal challenge. And one of the things we identified was the need to have consistent data collection with consistent fields and a regular cycle. That way, each time you have a new administration coming in, they don't start from scratch and there's some consistency. And with that, I will end my presentation, and I really appreciate being part of this panel. There's obviously a lot of common themes here, and happy to talk more about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. And I know we're at time, but I did want to ask maybe one question to the panel, if people can stay for a few minutes. But one thing that I think is really important is, as cities are kind of like rushing to build these biogas facilities in India, poor feedstock quality and poor operating practices could cause a lot of failures at the plant. And we've already seen that, and we will see it when things are going too quickly and they don't have time to like develop a system. So that can give biogas a bad name because the plants are down for maintenance, or they're not really functioning. So if you want to touch on how we can work to address that, that'd be helpful. Charlotte and Aditi, each like very quick.
Well, I mean, that's a key point, really, that of why we've set about developing a biogas regulatory framework. And there's more to the Making Biogas Happen program as well. There's so much we need to learn from people who are doing it well, and there has to be the right framework and the right minimum standards in place, and huge amounts of education and training. I mean, it was quite interesting listening to Anya earlier about the amount of organic materials still in the waste system after segregation. Italy, Julia will tell us, is being very successful at actually reducing that. I think Italy is now well over 85% collection of organic material, so there's less than 15% left, as opposed to Germany with over 35% left. So there's a lot we can learn, so we can do it, but we have to have those minimum standards.
Thank you. I think we probably will stop there.